In the dead of night, when the moon is high and ill winds blow, and the banshees cry and the moonlight casts an unearthly glow, arise, my love, with tales of woe.
Good evening. It is 12 midnight, the paranormal hour. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. I'm your host, Chief Lawson. Ghost to Ghost is a podcast to discuss all paranormal and parapsychology subjects. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats, so tell your friends, tell your family. Come listen to Ghost to Ghost. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is that time. It's time for Ghost to Ghost. Tonight, we have with us Heather Lawson, case manager and podcast director.
Hello.
And tonight we have Sierra Medley, investigator in training.
Hello.
And tonight we have a special episode. And I'll tell you how I kind of come across this episode. Last episode, on episode 7, at the end, the ghost story of the day, one of our newest members, Sierra Medley, had done a story about the Cline Avenue ghost. And this became an interest all of a sudden. I don't know why. It just spoke to me. So over the last... Squirrel. Yeah. That's what happens when we get distracted. Squirrel. So anyway, I decided, I want to take a little deeper dive in this. I went through a few books, and they led to other books that actually ended up going into Mexican mythology. And so this was kind of interesting. I thought it was just your typical white lady story, and that's all it was. And I didn't know I was actually going to get a podcast out of it. But after we got going, I thought, man, this is pretty good. So let me explain to you a little bit about this, because again, like I said, every city, big major city, has a lady in white or a lady in gray. I mean, that's pretty common folklore, and some are actually ghosts, but I mean, that's not uncommon. So anyway, as we got going through here, we found the name La Llorona come up, of Spanish nature. We also had a couple other names come up, and we kind of, like I said, I kind of thought it was like Chicago's Resurrection Mary. So anyway, there was also some conflicts about what city this appeared in. Some of the stories I found say Gary, some of them seen Hammond. Well, apparently it actually happened in both cities, because originally some of the suburbs was more Hammond, and then they were annexed into Lower Chicago and into Gary. So anyway, and I'll tell you, everyone knows that place is not the safest joint to be. We went up to cover medical in Hammond on a roller derby match several years back, and I remember we got up there, and I'm trying to find a really good hotel, because I've stayed at some that have their own manifestations of not ghosts, but interesting little critters. And so, the best one they had was a business. I think it had 3 stars, and the lady told me, she says, son, up here 3 stars are 5 stars, and that was the highest they had. I can't remember the name of it, but we get into the hotel. It's going to snow that night, and we get done over at the arena, and I end up having to check a couple people, and so we get back to the hotel, and it has 2 bedrooms. We're sharing a room with another lady, and it's on their team. The fireplace doesn't work, and we're told they're unsafe because they have gas leaks, so don't turn it on. That was our first introduction. We thought, this is nice. We'll go back, open the windows up, watch it snow, run the fireplace. We had wine and a mini bar, and we had some cheese, and man, this is going to be all right. Yeah, we got to watch a candle. That was about as close as we came to a fireplace, and
satellite was out.
Satellite was out. That went out right after we turned the TV on. That went out. It was about like yesterday. But anyway,
watch the snow on the TV and outside.
Yeah, and it, so, but we didn't venture very far, and I've never been one south side of Chicago, Gary, Hammond. I try to stay out of those areas. So, but anyway, Cline Avenue is actually a highway. That's one thing I found out. It's not actually an avenue per se as we think of it. And this story has several different versions. some of them unfold as a phantom hitchhiker that gets into the car and disappears. Some of them are a phantom hitchhiker with a dog that disappears, leaves the dog until they get where they're going, then the dog disappears. I don't get that. A woman walking along the roadside crying. Of course, she's usually wearing a white dress of that era. And driver offers her a ride and drives to where she says, and of course, she disappears before she gets there. So it's kind of interesting. And the other one, big one they had, is she asks Brumpley for the driver to pull over, and it's always near the banks of Little Calumet River. And it's in the neighborhood of Black Oak. And Black Oak used to be in Hammond, and it was annexed into Gary. And so anyway, how that has anything to do with the story, I really don't know, but it was in my research, so I thought I'd point that out. Those little tidbits of needless information. So anyway, to understand these encounters better, one must recognize that they typically occurred years ago before Cline Avenue was built to a highway. Okay? But even then, I still found them after it was a highway. So,
well, that still goes over the river.
Exactly. And the river, obviously, I think any researcher would say, hey, the river, you got water, you got the water tape theory right there. That's what probably is storing the energy. The Calumet River, I've seen it once. It wasn't overly impressive. It's not super deep. It's just a tributary river. You don't put too many boats on it. But anyway, there was one account in particular, and it's a little lengthy, but it's interesting. It was made by a person named Butchie. He was living in the neighborhood town in the 1980s, so this is after the highway. Found himself traveling along Cline Avenue after midnight. This is a statement he made. I had left the airport after dropping off a pilot friend of mine, was driving back to Griffith, where I lived, and I was taking Cline Avenue. It was a little before 1 a.m., and it was drizzling. I remember because my friend didn't know he would be able to fly out in a few hours to pick up his client in Indy. I had just passed Fifth Avenue when I saw a lady in a long dress, like a prom dress or wedding dress, all dressed up, walking in the rain, the same direction I was going. So I thought, right away she must have been going from home from a wedding reception or something. It was Saturday night late, and maybe broke down, got into a fight with her boyfriend, period. And I want to stop right there. Most brides leave with a groom, and they don't usually walk in a wedding dress. They call for somebody to come get them. I know it's 1980, they didn't have a lot of cell phones, but cell phones were still around in 80.
Well, you still call somewhere for
you'd send the groom out to get the tuxedo wet to find a payphone to call and get somebody to come get the car. I mean, I thought that was a bit odd that he thought that was just, it is what it is. Now, if it looked like a bridemaid's dress, okay. Yeah, I could see him getting an argument with a boyfriend or something, get out of the car. Anyway, it was almost winter, very early November, and pretty cold, and she had no coat or even long sleeves on. She was already pretty soaked. These were the days when people wouldn't accuse you of stuff so much as people would have, later on. So I pulled over, rolled down the window, and asked her if she needed a ride. She turned and looked at me. She was very sad, very, very sad. Just very sad. She got in the car and sat in the passenger seat. Very sad. As I pulled away, I let her sit for a few seconds, then asked her where she lived or where she was going, which would make her less apt to think you're up to something. As I pulled away, I let her... Okay, I'm sorry, I skipped around. And so she didn't look at me. She said, just drive. Okay. I could see that, some gal pissed off at somebody, and I said, to where? And laughed. It was raining harder, and wipers were going, and she was soaking wet. She still didn't look at me or answer. So I figured I'd keep going towards my house and wait for her to speak up, which she did after maybe a mile or so, right after we passed 80. Right before the Little Calumet River, she yelled, "Stop here!" And I almost jumped as she said it so loud. I slammed the brakes, thinking I was about to hit something. She opened the door, got out, and ran towards the river. I got out of the car, out of the road, and parked, and got out to see where she went, but she wasn't there. Nobody was around. I tell you, I stood there for a long time, just dumbfounded, just in shock, with my mouth open. When I went back to the car, even crazier was that the vinyl seat where she was sitting soaking wet was dry as a bone. Not one drop of water. This is before cell phones, and I don't know if I even would have called the police right then if I had one, because I really didn't know what happened. It was just weird. But when I got home, my conscience got the better of me, and I called to make a report. It was a desk number I got for the whatever station was in the area, and the desk sergeant, whoever, said, "Okay, thanks for calling." After I told him the woman jumped out of my car and ran for the river like it was totally normal, like, "Okay, have a nice day." We got to turn the page. So anyway,
Well, he's probably heard this story before.
Oh yeah. The Little Calumet River, plays a big role in this vanishing, because it seems to be very popular in the spot where she vanishes more often. And yeah, the cops. I mean, a lot of the accounts that I read, most of them said, "Okay, we'll send somebody out to check that out." None of them were upset, because obviously they'd been this drill before. I knew there was, years ago, one of the ones we did was University Heights Hospital. And I know it got so common with lights and stuff on, the police said, "Well, we're going to be on our rounds in that area. We'll check it out when we get over there." They didn't get a big hurry because it happened so much and they never found anything. So, okay, so here's possibility 2. This is a little different story. Though her similarity to the woman in white is obvious, there is added flavor to this Hoosier haunt, owing to the influence of Mexican settlers of the Indiana Harbor area. For when those settlers came north to Indiana, they brought a whole culture with them, including a particularly vivid piece of folklore old tale known as La
Llorona.
Boy, good thing I have a Hispanic wife, because that's a La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman. For $500,000, a phantom known as La Llorona, oh hell, I'm butchering that to no end, has chilled the blood of Mexico City residents. Now, this is Mexico City, with her cries of, and go ahead, honey, you can read that.
Mis hijos.
Yeah, my children, my children. According to prolific tales, she's been seen for centuries, wringing her spectral hands, her blood-soaked gown trailing behind her. The faithful say she is one of the damned, murderess condemned by God forever for killing her illegitimate children. Like many such wandering phantoms, woman in white, La Llorona is attached to a real-life counterpart. So, now, to dive a little deeper into that, okay, it's said that her name was actually Donna Luisa de Loveros, an Indian princess who, now this is not Indian, my understanding is this is like...
Well, those that don't know, Mexicans are Native Americans. Mm-hmm. And so...
but I think this context is more like... what am I trying to say? Aztec, not Aztec.
She would be Aztec.
Aztec, yeah.
So, and Indian, as we would all originally called Native Americans when Christopher Columbus discovered America.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's kind of the impression
also,
I got.
I was reading this.
Mm-hmm.
If she was a princess, and Doña means lady, so this would be Lady Luisa de Loveros.
Ah.
And if she was a noble, she wouldn't care where.
No, they never cared who they screwed or what kids were left over.
In the end, if she fell in love with this guy, even though he was a fellow nobleman,
if the king is listening, no personal things meant
she wouldn't care if he left her.
Yeah, exactly. She'd have money. She'd have
money, her own money.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a...
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of holes in a lot of these stories. As we go through them, you're going to find holes.
The story I grew up with is the lady...
Oh, so you heard this growing up?
Oh, yeah. Yes. This is
because this is supposed to be very popular all through not only Mexico, but Spain as well. And Portugal, I guess it's well heard of.
The story I grew up with is her name is Maria.
Yeah, that's down here somewhere in one of the other accounts. Yeah.
And she was...
Your mother's name was Maria.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's several other versions where her name changes. But there's 2 versions. One where she's poor, one where she's not. And one, where she's poor, she's still very pretty. And there's a Mexican nobleman comes and sweeps her off her feet and
that version's in here. It's further down, but yeah.
So I won't go into that one. The other one is where she is not poor, but she is the prettiest lady in the city.
Yes.
And she spurns many suitors until she finds another suitor that's just as elegant and pretty as she is. Mm-hmm. And they marry and they have children. Mm-hmm. And then one day he comes back. He goes off.
Yeah.
And he comes back with another lady and breaks her heart.
Yep.
But
this is the
children.
Mexican days of her life. As sand passes through, I don't know what the hell
she
it
is overcome with grief.
Yeah.
Of, having given her heart.
Well, sure.
And, she's enraged and she's one version she takes him down the river, obviously, and that's why she's the weeping woman, because she drowned them, or she stabs them. Either way, she's killed her children.
Yeah.
And then finally she comes out of her grief and she realizes, oh my God, I've killed my kids.
Yeah.
And now she's the weeping woman because she's weeping for her kids. And
that's the way this account kind of goes. Nobleman Don Nuno de Montesclaros. Okay, in 1550, and apparently she fell deeply in love with him, bore him 2 children. He refused to honor her marriage due to her lower station. When she was deserted, she ended up killing the kids. What amounts to?
Yeah, but if you read the story, hers was higher.
Yeah. Which
is weird.
Yeah, and then I got this, and it's very long. I'm going to summarize some of it. I'm not going to read all of it, but I got into the account that was on the site for Spain and Portugal, and it said the most well-known legend in the Latin world, and I couldn't believe how I kind of opened, I laughingly told Sierra, I kind of opened like a pimple, and all of a sudden it exploded. I mean, I had a ton of information that I never thought this little, because we found it in a book. It was just one little paragraph, and we never realized how much was attached to it. The short legend is one of the best Mexican myths that have traveled the world. Now, this, of course, points out to be a myth. This narrates the story of a female whose origin dates back more or less to the time of creation of Mexico, with the arrival of Spaniards to the lands. According to the legend, one of these has Cortez in it, too.
I have more on that one.
Oh, do you? Okay. According to legend, there was a native girl who had an affair with a Spanish gentleman. The relationship reached the point where the woman gave birth to three beautiful children, whose mother devotedly cared for them. As this couple continued to hide from everyone to take advantage of their bond, their days of love ran between lies and shadows, and after forming her family, informing, I believe is what they meant, informing the family, the woman wanted to ensure that her children had a full-time father, which is why she asked the Spaniard to formalize the relationship. Due to his status as an upper-class member, he frequently dodged the request from his lover and possibly the fear that what might be said. So after the woman's constant insistence and the man's refusal, sometimes later after her to marry from Spanish society. Once the native woman found out, she was devastated, wounded by the deceit.
That's probably why
betrayal.
They thought she was lower, because she was native.
Oh, that could be, because the Spaniards were considered royalty, I think, for the most part.
Well, I mean, they
had money, they owned land.
Even though she was probably royal class in the native society, she was still native.
Yeah. Yeah.
She wasn't European. She wasn't.
Yeah, that probably had a lot to do with it. So anyway, this one says that she carried the children to the riverbank where she gave them a last hug, symbol of her love for them, only to sink them to death. In other words, she drowned them. Yeah, it's a symbol of love. Yeah, that kind of love will kill you. Almost as bad as child support. Literally, yeah. But, rim shot. Anyway, yeah, we'll have to program it in the board. Okay, so anyway, that's the big one that I went through. And this the story came out of writings of Fray Diego Duran, one of the Spanish evangelists of all things. I think this was kind of a Mexican parable probably they used. So that was kind of interesting. They say the female manifests from Lake Texcoco, which was located in the legendary capital of the Aztec Empire. I knew how to pronounce this before I got on here.
Tenochtitlan.
No, that isn't it. Tanakh. It starts with Tanakh, and I can't think of it for the life of me.
No, that would be
Tenochtitlan?
Tenochtitlan.
Okay, well, we'll go with that. Anyway, it's kind of interesting. Other denotions were given to this woman is that mala madre, bad mother. According to the Mexican historian Efren Franco Fies, am I pronouncing that right? Okay. At the time of the colony, 1521 to 1821, the story began to gain strength and was an indigenous woman known as...
Malinche.
Yeah, what's that mean?
Literally means the traitor.
Oh.
So Malinche was the native translator that Cortez pressed into his service. Basically,
Pocahontas. Yeah.
Yeah, and the natives named her Malinche. That's not her real name.
Mm-hmm.
They named her Malinche because he also forced her to be his lover. And so they thought that she went willingly.
Yeah. Okay, and that was, and she was, now this other story says she worked for Cortez, and that's who forced her in.
Yeah, that's...
A son to Cortez. Well, see. Make sure I got this right.
No, she gave birth.
To a son for Cortez. Let me get that right. Okay. So, according to the accounts of many Mexican Americans living in Gary, Indiana, this ought to be interesting. The Cline Avenue ghost was a young Mexican immigrant who worked in the factory in a largely Mexican Cadre neighborhood and fell in love with a married Anglo foreman at the local steel mills. When the girl became pregnant with the man's child, she begged him to leave his wife so she could marry and raise the child. But the man had other plans. When the young woman showed up at his house, his fine house, to tell his wife about their love affair, he denied knowing her. Though he had been supporting her, paying rent on a small apartment, and giving her money for food, he abruptly cut her off, abandoning her and the unborn child. For months, as she became heavier with the child, the girl wandered the streets of Gary until finally she gave birth to a beautiful son. Thinking that her former beloved would surely return to her, then when he saw the baby, she traveled to the mill to find him. He refused to meet with her and instead called the authorities to remove her from the premises. Desolate, the girl walked the streets until the wee hours of the morning, the baby in her arms, weeping and mourning. Just before dawn, in total despair, she drowned the baby in the Lake Calumet River before stepping in front of a bus and dying herself. I think I'd rather try to drown myself than step in front of a freaking bus, especially in Gary. Anyway.
Because you're not guaranteed to die if you step in front of a bus.
If you do you want to be stuck on Calumet Avenue in Gary, Indiana? Shit, I'd like to hunt a better place than that. No offense to our listeners in Gary. I'm sure we lost a few there. Anyway, yeah. Possible number 5, Cline Avenue, Hammond. Now, this is where before the annex, yeah. Ghostly bride known as Sophia. Yeah, this is a better one. I got a kick out of reading this one. Who had been murdered near Cline Avenue and has been observed still in white. At times, the ghost of a mother and her baby has been seen too. The mother is said to have purchased milk on this street without paying for it 3 days straight. On the third day, the clerk of the milk store followed the phantom mother to the graveyard where she vanished into the grave. The mother's body was laying there. The baby was alive. Cline Avenue is crowded. It would be if it has all these different variations, but possibility 6. Yeah.
A lot of ladies and weeping ladies in white.
Yeah. I know a couple guys we ought to send up here. Anyway, okay, a woman who's been seen and a woman who lost her children in a car accident. Okay, now we're up to car accidents. We're more modern here. So that's one. Possible number 7. In 1954, a man killed his bride at Cline Avenue and Michigan Avenue and buried her in the woods near there where there was poor people's graves, paupers' graves, I'm assuming. In 1965, people started to see the lady dressed in white walk around the area. Well, many instances knowing that such stories about her disappearing in cab and others, but this one shows her walking around. A question with that is, why did he decide to do it on the street? If you're going to kill somebody, you don't necessarily want it to be a public thing unless you're a dictator. I mean, it doesn't work well.
And nobody said anything? They just let her
apparently, and they dragged her ass into the woods and buried her. No one seemed to notice that. Of course, it is scary. Anyway.
In 54.
Yeah, so I don't know. Possibility 8. A few years ago, there was a highway that was being built in East Chicago. That would be Cline Avenue. And Griffith was named Kilman Avenue. Apparently not, I'm sorry.
Cline.
Cline Avenue. The road wasn't completed yet, but traffic was permitted on it. That seems odd. It was because usually even after it's completed, 465, they leave it blocked off forever. If you're listening and you're the planner on 465, somebody ought to take you out back and without a blindfold. Anyway, when help came, they found no victims in the wreck. Oh, I'm sorry, got ahead of myself. Okay, road was completely completed yet, but they were letting traffic on it. So late one evening, a car ran off the road near a turn, crashed below a ditch. When help came, they found no victims in the wreck. Later, it was made known that there was a young woman and a baby in the car. No trace of it today has been found of the two. Story gets that there was numerous reports made afterwards. A motorist seeing woman dressed in white holding a bundle as if a small baby, standing by the exact spot where the car went off the road, looking down toward the ditch. Like, oh shit, who parked that there? Okay. We had to do something with levity. Okay, possibility number 9. About 70 or 80 years ago, there was a little girl who was raped on her wedding night in Hammond in the woods off Cline Avenue. She was raped and then murdered by an assailant every year. Supposedly around the time of her wedding, there was a white figure observed, more or less, floating across the prairie, hands out by... It says by Client Avenue. I think it's supposed to be Cline Avenue. Some of these people write these, I swear to God, if you cut and paste them, it's a horrible idea because most of these people obviously didn't graduate English. Well, there again is Gary. I'm about to quit that. They're going to get mad in a few minutes. Anyway.
Gary's going to call.
Yeah, we'll get that call. I remember, what was it? The guy that played the movie Jerk. He also played Father of the Bride. I'm trying to think of the actor. He plays banjo. Steve Martin, years and years ago in his early career, he made fun of a town in Indiana, and they got mad. They sent out a whole bunch of hate mail to him, and he actually, when they visited, they tried to embarrass him, and it was hilarious. So I better quit. Anyway, where were we at? There's a superhighway that intersects the prairie now. I haven't seen her for a few years, but last around the date of her wedding, she was seen again, which is oxymoron and contradictory. But anyway, there was quite a turmoil about it in Hammond, and people were out there with flashlights trying to find out what it was. Period. They have even had an actual picture of what it was supposed to look like. So I don't know if that's a picture they took of it or some 8-year-old scribbled out something as a sketch artist and turned it in. I mean, I don't know. Possibility 10, and just so you know, this is the last one. I think they call this story, and he put store, not story. The story, white lady, anyway, there was a white lady, and it says correction. I have no idea what that means. Lady in white standing in the highway that goes under the Cline Street. There was a lot of woods out there. Well, she is standing there, and she had a dog. Now, this is the interesting one, with her. The cab driver came along, and she stopped the cab driver, and they picked her up with the dog. He picked up the radio to say that he had a passenger. When he looked back, all he could see was the dog. Lady had disappeared. He knew that he had seen her get into the cab, but now she was gone. My friends and I went out one night. It was raining real hard, and there was a lot of mud puddles. Our car got stuck. We really started getting scared. There was this big field there, and all the corn was dead. It's probably because it was a fall. Anyway, but yeah, we're going to go on. Usually ghosts don't kill a whole field of corn. I'm just saying. There were no lights around it at all. Well, we got out of the car and tried to push it. We heard if you hear a dog barking, it's because the woman and the dog are nearby. We heard the dog barking. It kept getting closer and closer. We were so scared that we took off and never found out.
It could have just been a dog.
It could have been a dog. Yeah, there's a lot of dogs out there. Hell, there's a dog over in my addition, which I certainly not going to tell anybody where I live at, but I'll tell you what, the damn dog needs to shut the hell up at 1 a.m. Okay, anyway, the neighbors would appreciate it. Causes. Okay, now we've gone from, cause, and we're going to go to effect later. But anyway, okay, there's many possible elements to this whole thing. We look at all the different stories, and, one thing it says to me is if there's that many different accounts, we're probably talking more legend at this point. Now, it probably does have a basis of truth somewhere wound in there. I mean, I don't doubt that a bit. I think there is a basis in there. Most white lady stories, well, it's like, okay, one thing we always said in intelligence is all lies lead to the truth. That's where X-Files got it from. And it's true. You know, there's always, most stories, whether it's intentional or unintentional, come from a small ounce of truth or something someone has seen. The problem is when you pass something, and I'll never forget, this was an experiment in the Navy. They took 10 guys, lined them up, and they told them a rather long story. I think it was like 3 sentences. And they had to pass that down the line. By the time it got to the 10th guy, it was more than half changed. You know, it's the problem gets to be how when we pass these legends, if we don't memorize them exact. In the lodge, we memorize the word verbatim immediately, so we are going word for word the same way it was 100 years ago. So it stays constant. But when you don't have that, it doesn't. So certainly this has the aspects of a legend. Now, having said that, at the same time, it also has aspects of several other things. So, I mean, you could go either way with this thing. So I think at one point, though, it probably did have a ghost involved. Now, if the highway, Cline Avenue being turned into a highway, the prairie area, all the dead corn, who knows? Anyway, any of that could have changed around, and certainly we know construction theory it certainly states anytime there's construction, either stops or it starts or even increases activity. So it could have stopped all the activity. It's certainly a good legend, if nothing else, to tell. Much like Chicago's Resurrection Mary. So it'll go down in the annals, and it'll be there for a long time. But I thought it was a fun story to go through tonight. So, Sarah, we haven't given you much time to speak, and I apologize. But what do you think? You want to put your...
jump in.
Yeah, you got to jump in, yeah.
Yeah, I'll get better at it eventually.
I know you will. It'll be fine. You're doing fine. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I'm going off your telephone, like the telephone game, which kind of...
Oh, yeah.
Like we were talking about in the Navy.
Yes.
Even though it's getting passed down and you're not quite remembering it right, people are also probably embellishing it. So that way the story is more interesting as it goes on, which is probably why there's so many different accounts.
Good buddy of mine one time, I'll never forget, he had an injury while we were gone on a Shrine Imperial. And we're sitting in a bar. Happens a lot. Anyway, and we're having drinks, and someone asked him, his arm's in a sling. He goes, what happened? He says, well, I was defending 2 ladies' honor between this jerk, and, you know, he looked worse than I did. And my buddy whispered in my ear, he goes, what happened to him? I go, he fell in the shower. You know, but yeah, you tend to embellish things. I mean, people have a natural tendency. It's not a bad thing. They don't intentionally do it. They just tend, if they start paraphrasing, that's another way, like we said with the telephone game, where that gets drug out and changed a bit. So I think there's definitely some. Did you want to add some? I know you did a lot of research on this, on the Hispanic end. Throw some more out there.
Well, we were talking about Llorona, and everybody's like, well, where did it come from? It's, so most people, Spain, it's Spanish. It's European at the very, very basis of it.
Which is different than Mexican.
Yes. It's first found in a poem.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you talking about that. You want to read that, or is it too long?
Ooh, it's kind of long.
Well, maybe we shouldn't read that, yeah.
And it's in Castilian Spanish. But it
well, that shouldn't be a problem for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
It was written by Manuel Elogio Carpio Hernandez. You can find it on a blog, the Library of Congress blogs.
Yeah, and I read that one. That was one of the sources I was reading from.
And so... And it was really interesting digging through how it came,
well,
through from European. They brought it with them, and then it kind of the natives, the Nahuatl, when Montezuma had a vision 10 years before Cortez.
Yeah, I remember reading that. Yeah, that the invasion.
Literally and that was his first envision of La Llorona. With
excuse me,
Citra Cotto. She's a It's one of the goddesses, the death goddess.
Okay.
And that was his vision.
Well, it's like anything else.
And they all just got entwined. In
Yeah, a lot of people bring with them their cultures, okay? The Lugaroo, which we don't do a lot of cryptozoology. I'm always getting questions, why are you guys having the Bigfoot people on? Well, we don't do Bigfoot, The good thing about ghosts are they generally don't kill people, although there are exceptions to the rule. When it comes to Bigfoot, it's like the scene in Star Wars New Hope where R2-D2 is playing the Wookiee, and he says, usually, though, when a droid wins, they don't pull out the arms of the... Yeah, it's that kind of situation. These things tend to be a little more violent, and so I tend to try to find hobbies that don't lead immediately to my death, but no, when the culture of the werewolf and the lichen left Europe and came here because the French brought it. Actually, it was brought by the French, not the British. They came up with the legend of Lugaroo, which you go down to New Orleans, and it's like anything else. Those people are very afraid of Lugaroo. And, when you look at the legend and you go through Lugaroo, it's exactly, or damn near exactly the same as werewolf.
I know where I'm from in southern Texas, right there near the border of Mexico. She's used as like a boogeyman.
What is it?
La Llorona.
Oh, okay.
She's used as a boogeyman.
Well, yeah, a lot of them are used as the boogeyman.
If you don't behave, La Llorona's going to come get you.
Yeah.
She's going to take you away if you don't behave.
The scary thing is, if you think of it, when they say that John Wick is the guy you hire to kill the boogeyman, you wonder how badass he actually is. But anyway, yeah.
And then, some other areas... She's almost like a banshee type spirit where she predicts death.
Well, and a lot of those cultures from Ireland and Scotland came here too. I mean, you had this big melting pot of cultures, and they kind of made these folk legends fit. I'm not saying some of them don't have base value. I think they do, but we're seeing more of them fitting in. So that's nothing unusual. So, well, is there anything else that we want to put with that?
Here?
No.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I tell you what then, at this point, we're going to get ready to close off. I want to cite my sources real quick here. Ghostshipfragrance.com. I swear to God to you, I found this site, and this is funny. And it turns out this lady, I'm not making fun of this, I want to make this point out. She makes fragrances based on these stories and legends, including Bloody Mary.
That's pretty cool, though.
It's different. I'll tell you, it's called ghostshipfragrance.com. And I had to look at the site longer than I did the rest of them to kind of wrap my head around all of it. But anyway, Hoosier Folk Legends by Ronald L. Baker, which we enjoy his books. OriginMexico.com, blogs of the Library of Congress, including Folklife Today, an introduction to the Weeping Woman, and Root, Branches, and the Missing Link from Spain. So that's where we got all this at today. And with that, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and at this time, I would like to have a shout-out to a couple of our listeners. To Josh and Jennifer, who are my neighbors who listen, welcome and thank you so much for listening. So back to our show. It is now time for the ghost story of the day. Tonight's ghost story of the day will be Heather Lawson.
All right, we got a couple of Mexican folklore legends. First one is El Cucuy. El Cucuy is a boogeyman. El Cucuy is a shadowy figure parents often invoke to ensure their children behave. El Cucuy is said to hide under beds or in closets, always watching for mischievous children. Unlike the generic boogeyman, El Cucuy is often depicted as a shapeshifter, adapting to whatever scares you the most. So the next time you feel that tingle on the back of your neck, maybe it's time to head indoors.
Thanks for listening to Ghost to Ghost. Again, I'm your host, Chief Lawson. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats on the 15th and 30th of the month at midnight. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, maybe have a question or subject you'd like to ask about on air, or be used on the show, please email us at ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com, ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com. I want to thank my production staff on Spirit, Jennifer Verne, our research manager and our producer, and Heather Lawson, our trainer on Spirit and our podcast director, for helping make these podcasts possible. My Chief of Staff, Andrew Brooks, for his guidance and help on the scripts, and everyone else involved. Thank you so much. See you next time. Until then, stay safe and remember the truth is out there. Good night. Ghost to Ghost podcast and its contents is the property of Spirit Paranormal Ltd. All rights reserved. We welcome you to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. You may not, except with written permission, use or distribute its contents for commercial use. Spirit Indiana Paranormal, covering the Hoosier State since 2002, Indy's oldest parapsychology investigation group. If you're experiencing what you believe to be paranormal issues, reach out to us for help at www.spiritindiana.com or call our hotline at 317-883-9103. Again, that is www.spiritindiana.com or our hotline at 317-883-9103. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself and the ones you love, and be safe out there.